Hey, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to show you how to create a basic platformer with all the standard features. But before we begin, I just want to ask you one small thing. Leave a comment under the video, something like great video or even just thanks for the tutorial. It really helps me move forward, thank you. In this video we are going to build this game. You'll learn how to get started with Unity, use the basic tools, create game objects, understand simple programming and much more. This is NK Game Developer, let's get started. Alright, let's get started by creating a basic example of 2D platformer. And if you have any questions along the way, don't be lazy, just Google it. First, we need some graphics. For this video, I've prepared a special graphics pack. You'll find the download link in the description. Let's open the scene. Each scene in Unity represents either a level or a menu. Unity mostly works with objects, and every sprite you see on the scene is a separate object. So let's begin by creating our main character. Just drag our sprite onto the scene, and that's it. Now, let's add the necessary components to this object. For example, let's add a rigid body 2D component to our hero. Why? That gives the character weight and gravity, in other words, physical properties. Let's check the box to freeze rotation on the Z-axis, so the character doesn't spin around. Unity doesn't recognize the boundaries of an object unless you explicitly define them. This is important for movement and collision detection. So let's add a box collider 2D to outline the character's shape. Great, let's run it. The object falls. But why? Physics pulls it down and there is no platform underneath him yet. Let's fix that. Drag the platform image into the scene and add a collider to it. Let's run it again. Perfect. Our character now interacts with the platform, but he can't move yet. Can he? Let's fix that too. Just create a blank script and add it as a component to our hero. When we open the script, we'll see a basic template. I hope you have at least some idea of how C# works, because we'll need it now. Here are two methods. Start runs once when the game starts, update runs every frame. To make our character move, let's first create a reference to the rigid body 2D component. That's how we handle physics in Unity. Then let's add just one line. We set the velocity along the x-axis to a specific value and leave the y-axis unchanged. When working with physics, it's best to do this inside the fixed update method, because it calculates physics more accurately. For everything else, just use update. Let's run it. Awesome. There is no animation yet, but it's already fun to see. And what about jumping? That's also just one line of code. And that's what I love about Unity. Nothing unnecessary. We use a function from the rigid body 2D component. Let's create a new method. We'll call it jump. Inside it, we apply force in the upward direction. Now we need to call that method at the right moment, when the spacebar is pressed. For that, we use the update method, which constantly checks for conditions, like is a key being pressed. We use the input class for that. You can assign any key for jumping, but in this case we'll use the spacebar. Let's test it. Nice. Hope you are keeping up. If not, pause the video and reply that part. You've got this. Now for the animation. If the game is simple, you can skip complicated setups and just do it like this. Open the animation window and create a new animation. Drop in the frames and adjust the speed if needed. Then create different states like jump, idle or walk. Next, go into the animator window and connect those states together. Notice that Unity automatically added a new component to our character, the animator. The rigid body 2D handles physics, the collider handles collision boundaries, and the animator is in charge of animations. Each one has its role. Let's begin by declaring the animator as a private variable. Then, in the start method, we access that component. When calling the jump function, we trigger the animation using a trigger called jump. Inside fixed update, we check whether the player is moving on the x-axis. If they are, we enable the walking animation. If not, we set the walking variable to false. Now, let's implement character flipping, so the hero turns in the direction we press. To do this, we check the value of the horizontal input variable and rotate the character accordingly. We'll only run this method if the player is not idle. Let's test it running the scene. Now this is starting to look good. We have successfully implemented movement, jumping and animation for our character. Next, I just added a background image. That's also really easy to do. Just drag the background image into the scene and adjust it however you need. Now it's time to add something the player can pick up. Let's say we add a fruit. For example, we'll drop in a simple animation right away and add a collider 2D component so that's right, we can actually interact with it. And don't forget to assign the tag fruit so the game knows this object is a fruit. Then in the player script we write some code. If we call it with an object and that object tag is fruit, then we'll just delete that object. This is just for testing. Let's check if it works perfect. We can now pick up the fruit. While going through the asset pack, I found this cool platform, like a living platform. Let's drag it into the scene just for fun. Drop in the image of the platform and copy it a couple of times so we have 3 connected platforms. Add a collider and then make it move back and forth along the x-axis every 3 seconds. Right after that, we'll write a simple script for it. In the script, I did the following. I created 2 variables, a minimum x position and a maximum x position. Then in the start method, I call a function called change position. This function will now be triggered every 3 seconds. Inside it, I generate a new random value and set the platform's position to that new vector. We drop this script onto the object and in the inspector we input values similar to what I've got here. Let's test it. Yep, there we go. Looks great. Now let's make it so the fruit changes position every time we pick it up. For that, I opened up the player script where we handle picking up the fruit. I removed the line that destroys the fruit and instead created a new vector with random coordinates, which I adjusted right there on the spot. I left the rotation unchanged, then simply set the fruit's position to that vector. Now every time we pick up the fruit, it'll teleport to a new random spot. As you can see, it works really nicely. Let's go ahead and add a counter for this fruit. To do that, we need to create a canvas. You've probably heard the term UI before, user interface. We'll need to set it up so that it scales correctly with our screen resolution. We set the resolution to the standard 1920 by 1080 and set the match value to 0.5. Now we can create a text element for our fruit counter. I created and configured it quickly. In the code, we first include the Text Mesh Pro and the UI libraries. Then create 2 variables, one for the text element and one for the fruit counter value. In the update method, we assign the counter value to the text on the canvas, and every time we pick up a fruit, we increase the counter by 1. Also, don't forget to link this in the scripts inspector. Just drag the text object into the empty text field. Perfect. So, what's missing for this game to feel complete? Right, a loss condition. Let's simply create a box spawner at the top of the screen, and if the player touches even one of these boxes, the scene reloads and the game restarts. Nice and simple. First, we'll add the box image into the scene and attach box collider to the and rigid body to the components to it. And of course, don't forget to give this box the tagged obstacle, so the player can interact with it. Then drag the object into your project folder and create a prefab out of it. Prefab? What is it? What's a prefab? Well, let me quickly explain. A prefab is a way to save all the components and settings of your object so you can reuse it over and over. Basically, it's like a template that you can drag into any scene whenever you want, just drag it in. Now, we'll write a small script that deletes the object whenever it touches something. We create a script called box. If the object collides with anything, we delete it. Done. Attach the script to the box prefab. Next, let's create a spawner. Just make an empty object and name it spawner box. This will be responsible for generating our boxes from above. Alright, either copy the script or download it from the description if you'd like. I'm sure you'll manage just fine. Now just drag the box prefab into the object field in the scripts inspector and set the default values like I have. Oh, by the way, we forgot to implement the actual interaction between the player and the box. Let's fix that. In the player script, we'll write the code. First, we need to import the scene management library. If the tag object we collide with is obstacle, then we simply reload the scene. And there we go. This is the most basic example of how to make a simple game with regular functionality. Coming up next, I'll show you even more game dev tricks and a bunch of cool stuff. This was me, NK. Check out my Discord server and Instagram. See you all.